put an emoji that represents how you're feeling right now in the chat. Yes, a rocket to the moon. I love that. Cold. Me too. I have the heater on. Santa. I love that. My, I usually have a painting in my background. My daughter loves Christmas, and so we wrap the painting together in wrapping paper. We are just, yes, Christmas tree. Yes. We're just putting emojis that represent how we're feeling right now in the chat while we wait for people to join us. Avocado. That's super interesting. I wonder what that means.
What I had for lunch.
Oh, okay, okay. I see. I was like, it's creamy, it's healthy, you're feeling healthy. That's good. Mind blown. All right, we're gonna start in one more minute. Hi, Julia. Hi, Frankie. Hi, Angela. Good to see you. Hi, Bianca. Hi, Caroline. Hi, Dominic. All right. Gerta has her laptop on. Chippy has the party emoji. Yes. So good to see you here today. Let's get started. Um, all right. We're all here to jumpstart our 2025 L6 and above PM job search. And I just want to take a second and reflect that this year has gone by for me really, really fast. I couldn't really believe that. So before Thanksgiving, I was feeling like, oh my gosh, Thanksgiving. And now the year is ending. I'm like, oh my gosh, where did the time go? And I I had this sentiment pretty much all year long that this has not been a super easy year for me and also for a lot of people. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put together this workshop for you because I wanted to share the same strategies that I have been sharing with my clients over and over again. And I'm also very happy that a lot of my clients have landed offers from the top tech companies this year. And so I thought as a way of giving back at the end of the year, I want to compile all the learnings and compile all the insights that I have learned to share with you, hoping that it would help you jumpstart your 2025 job search, even though it's not 2025 yet. And with that, I also want to recognize you for showing up early because it's not 2025. And you know that a lot of people are waiting until next year to start planning and to start thinking about the job search. And so just the fact that you're here live or maybe watching the recording back later shows that you have to drive. It shows that you are motivated to do this for yourself. So I just want to take a second to recognize you for showing up. And my friend Gerta here will help us moderate the chat because Gerta and I have been business partners over the last year. She is an expert negotiations coach, and together, our goal is to help our clients increase their job offers by six figures. So I want to pass the mic over to Gerta. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you want folks to put their thoughts and questions in the chat.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Gerta. I'm a negotiations expert and co-founder of yournegotiations.com, where I help people increase their job offers on average by 90K and up to 550K. That was a fun one. Nancy and I collaborate a lot, and today we're curious what the questions would be around compensation and your PM career. So I'll be monitoring the chat. At the end, we'll have time for a Q&A. So if you'd like to stay after the 30 minutes, we'll keep going for a few more minutes.
Thank you so much, Gerta. So with that, I would love to know what is top of mind for you right now as we're wrapping up 2024? What are some of the questions you have when it comes to 2025 job search? Put it in the chat and let us know. The quiet crowd today.
We have the first few questions. So we have, is there a framework that you recommend to nail product sense slash analytical for big tech? I
Mary
assume you
said
mean.
portfolio or resume. NM said your pulse on the market. PPM said your best time to start a job search. Yeah, let's take a look at some of the questions after I share some of the insights that I have been repeating. So with that, let me continue with the stories I want to tell you today. First and foremost, before I go into sharing a bunch of things with you, I want to take a second and introduce myself. My name is Nancy Chu, and I'm a PM coach. Prior to being a full-time coach, I used to be PM director at Roku, and before that, I used to be PM manager at Meta. Now, my journey to Meta has been very difficult in my own opinion because I have failed the Meta interview multiple times, despite putting in over 100 hours of prep. And it was such a hard process for me. It was so difficult. Uh, but I'm very thankful that I eventually cracked the interview. Eventually, I figured out a way to make it happen. And eventually, I became a calibrated interviewer. And while I was at Meta, I conducted over 200 interviews for IC candidates as well as manager level candidates. And I also became one of recruiters' main partners in assessing the product sense signal. Because my journey has been rough, there's been so many ups and downs. It became a passion for me to just share everything I know because it was it's been a passion for multiple years to help others go through this journey with a lot more ease compared to what I went through. And so if you were to look at my testimonials page, you would see that there's a lot of testimonials from Meta PMs. And that's because even before I became a full-time coach, I started to help my colleagues go through this process when they were trying to move into that PM role internally at Meta, just because it's not right that you have to put in hundreds of hours of prep and still not make it happen. I knew that there's a better way. And so when I finally figured it out, I wanted the whole world to know. And so with that process, it planted a seed and that was the start of my coaching journey in a very casual and organic way. It started in 2020 when I started to help my colleagues go through this process. And now I do this full time. I empower product leaders to land, up level, and thrive in the top tech companies like the companies that you see here on the screen. And today, like I said, the reason why I finally decided to host this session on Maven for the very first time is because I've been repeating the same strategies over and over for multiple clients every week. And so I hypothesized that you might also have the same questions as my clients. And my ultimate goal is to help you minimize the mindless prep that I was doing a lot on my own. A lot of my clients have been put in a lot of mindless prep. Let me know in the chat if this resonates with you. By mindless prep, what I mean is doing a lot of mock interviews without really knowing if I'm doing it the right way, right? Going through the motions of applying frameworks and trying to practice all the case examples that I could find without knowing if this is actually the right way of doing it. That's what I mean by mindless prep. So if this resonates, if you have the same sentiment, put it in the chat and let me know if this is resonating. My goal is to help you move from mindless prep to more intentionality. with more intention, you wouldn't need to put in over 100 hours of prep like I did. And that is going to be the key that will shorten your time to offer because we don't want to be stuck in the job search process, right? We don't want to be stuck in just trying to prepare for interviews. We want this time window to be as short as possible without wasting a lot of time because this is so draining for all of us. And I want to share some stories with you and just how I see the situation by framing it around a success formula that I think is really, really helpful in thinking about the problem of finding a job search. And this is a formula that I learned from my own coach, which is so helpful for me. She said to achieve success, there's three variables. The first one is to have clarity. And the second one is to figure out what the right actions are, not just any actions, but the right actions, and then actually put in the time. And this explains so well why oftentimes it takes a long time to achieve success. It's probably because you don't have a lot of clarity. And without having extreme clarity, it is hard to know if your actions are the right actions. We don't want to be taking random actions, right? We want to be taking the right actions. And that's the goal for today is to share with you what I know that has worked for my clients to help you come up with the clarity to come up with a strategic plan that is right for you. That's the goal. And to help you achieve clarity, I want to talk about two assumptions that a lot of my clients make that I hypothesize you might also be making the same assumptions. And every time we set a goal, it's also very important to set a non goal. So that's what we're doing here also. A goal for our session today is to help you come up with clarity. The non-goal is to help you get more interviews and ace interviews because we only have 30 minutes together and there's not enough time to cover everything. So with that, the way I look at job search is actually pretty simple. It only has two parts to the job search journey, which is knowing what you want and then taking the right actions, which mirrors the success formula perfectly. First starts with knowing what type of companies and roles that you want to target that are right for you, and then you could take the right actions. So with that, a lot of my clients would be stuck with number one. They don't really know what companies to target and they don't really know what roles would be good for them. And so they would ask me, oh, should I go for head of product roles in startups or should I target senior IC roles in bigger tech companies? And this is a great question. And if we don't have clarity here in this step, it makes it harder for us to figure out what the right actions are afterwards, right? So everything starts with clarity. And there's a lot of variables at play here. What does a company do? What's the manager like? How big is the scope? How successful is the company? And then, of course, total compensation. And all the variables are all valid and make a lot of sense. And for me, because I love speed, I hate the feeling of being stuck in indecision and uncertainty. And so I like to go to the one variable that makes a very, very big difference in the quality of my life and the quality of a lot of my clients' lives, and that is total compensation. Yes, all the variables in helping you come up with clarity for that question are all valid, but the total compensation for me is one of the biggest needle movers. And that's because when you're comparing your total compensation from startups to bigger tech companies, you're looking at a 2 to 3x difference in terms of total comp if you were to join a FANG company. And 2x or 3x more in terms of total comp is life changing for a lot of people. It was life changing for me. Let's take the numbers that my client shared with me as an example for this illustration. They were a PM manager at a startup, at an AI startup that's doing very well right now, but they decided to join Facebook. And when they joined Facebook as IC6 PM, their total compensation in terms of the cash component went up from 220K to 470K. So the delta is 250K. That's $250,000 in year one alone. So they more than doubled their total compensation. And so at this point, a lot of my clients would then ask, but what if this AI startup does really well and they IPO in a year or two or three? How do you think about that? So for that, I recommend that you plot it out in Excel. So when I used their numbers for this exercise, this is what the graph looked like in terms of cumulative compensation, in terms of cash, as close to cash as possible. So cumulative compensation is really just adding up the compensation that you earn year after year. So in year one, the delta is 250K. In year two, the delta is $500,000. In year three, we're looking at $1 million. And year five, we're looking at $1.5 million in terms of the delta difference between the cumulative compensation before and after. And this is assuming a 5% increase year after year, which is very conservative if you work at a FANG company, because you might get promoted within the 5 years and you would always get stock options along the way. So this is a very conservative model of the two scenarios that are at play here. For me, I was at startups before I joined Facebook, and I was able to experience what this delta actually means in real life. For me, I was able to fund my daughter's college education so that I never have to worry about it. I maxed out her 529, and now she's only 7, and I don't have to worry about her college education, which is not a luxury that I had before growing up. And I was able to pay down my mortgage and decrease my mortgage payments. And I was able to fund my business now. And so, for all the reasons surrounding this delta in terms of total compensation, that's what I meant by this being very life changing for a lot of people, certainly for me, which means that if this makes a meaningful difference in your life, then I would recommend that we think about a plan so that you can plan your 2025 job search to include and target the top tech companies that are public right now. If this doesn't make a meaningful difference, then let's look at another way to prioritize the clarity when it comes to deciding, okay, head of product roles at startups or senior IC roles in bigger companies. With that, it takes me to the first assumption that I want to talk to you today, which is, okay, I plan to go through this preparation phase for the top tech companies. Now I want to put in X number of mocks a day or X number of mocks a week, and I'll be ready. This is an assumption. Why do you think I'm saying that? What is the assumption here? If you had to take a guess, or if you had an opinion, put it in the chat and let me know. What is the assumption behind this sentiment? Volume equals success. Right. That's exactly it. So the assumption here is that the mocks that you're doing equal high quality prep. That's just an assumption. Because the truth is that it largely depends on the readiness level of the partners that you're mocking with, right? So if you're mocking with someone who's more ready than you will get a lot of value for sure. But if you're mocking with someone who's less ready than you, then you would be the one providing more value. So the assumption that more mocks equal high quality prep is only half true. It really depends. And a lot of my clients have a mental model when it comes to time management and time planning that looks something like a linear graph. The x-axis is time and the y-axis is effort. And so they'll think, okay, I'm going to dedicate the month of December for the prep and I'll be ready. Or they'll say, okay, I'm going to start my prep and then I'm going to do this for 4 weeks and then I'll be ready. Again, this is an assumption. And I have a different perspective because my mental model actually looks more like a bell curve. The reason my mental model looks like a bell curve is because, yes, in the beginning, it is kind of linear. you need to have a basic understanding of what the prep includes and requires of you. And once you go deeper into the prep, you're going to discover parts of the interview process that you often get stuck in. So, for example, in a product sense interview, a lot of people get stuck in segmentation. They don't know if they're picking the right segment, for example. And once you work through the places where you get stuck, and you start to experience a sense of ease, it starts to feel easier for you, then that means that you're at the top of the bell curve. And that's when you know that you're ready for these interviews. And coming down the bell curve is usually really fast, within a week or two. And so, if you want to have high conviction and high confidence that you can walk into these interviews feeling like you're ready, you have to be at the top of the bell curve first. And then coming down, it's only a week or two. But if you don't feel that sense of ease, that means you're not at the top of the bell curve yet. For me, I was stuck on that upward slope for a very, very long time. That's why I put in over 100 hours and it still didn't work for me. And so, without experience that shift in how you feel about these interviews, I don't recommend that you take the interview because you're not ready yet. So that's why my perspective is more like a bell curve. This takes me to assumption number 2, which is I want to practice with the other companies first before I talk to my dream company. I understand the sentiment, but again, this is based on an assumption that my clients are making, which is the practice will be realistic. So put it in the chat and let me know why you think that why you think that I think that this is an assumption that the practice is realistic if you practice at other companies. You don't actually care about this one. That's very true. The bar is not the same. That's exactly it. The bar is not the same. Also, the process is not exactly the same either. So the way I see the interview process is exactly the same as a performance. You're basically putting on a show at the end of the day. That's what the interviews are. So imagine that you're about to perform on stage. You definitely should do a dress rehearsal, right? That's what the dress rehearsals are for. It gets you ready for the actual performance. And the dress rehearsal needs to be as realistic as possible, right? And if you're interviewing at other companies that may or may not have the same processes or that may or may not have the same bar, it's not actually a very valid and efficient dress rehearsal, right? That's why this approach is an assumption that doesn't always work very well. The truth is, there's the on-stage prep and there's also the off-stage prep. Before you get on stage, there's parts where you have to know your lines very well, right? Or you have to know your instrument very well before you go through the dress rehearsal. And then the on-stage prep is where you are practicing how to manage your anxiety. You're practicing how to manage the emotions that are coming up so that if you mess up, if you forget your lines, or if you hit a wrong note, you keep going, right? So the dress rehearsal is very, very valid, but it's not the only part of the preparation process, especially if your dream company is Meta or Google that has a team matching process. So, for example, if your dream company is Meta, and then you assume that when you practice for other companies, it's going to get you ready for Meta, it's not necessarily true because Meta doesn't do behavior interviews until the very end. And a lot of other companies will include behavior interviews in the earlier rounds. And so basically, you're preparing for behavior interviews that you don't really need for Meta yet. Right? So that's an example where this approach is not a very straight line into, it's not a very shortcut. It's not a shortcut if your dream is Meta and Google. And especially if there's a team matching process involved in this process. So a lot of my clients would have a roadmap that looks something like this. They would practice with companies A, B, and C first, and then they go for the Meta and Google interview. And then if they do well, then they would go through team matching. I understand the sentiment behind this roadmap, but I've also seen the aftermath of what happens with this roadmap, which is some of my clients, they go through ABC first and they still put in a lot of time and effort to prepare because we all want to show up really like the best version of ourselves, right? So of course, we're going to prep and we're not going to wing it. And let's say they do very well, they're going to get an offer. And at this point in time, it's very hard to say no to a job offer, especially if company A, B, and C are also very good companies, right? And so they would accept a job offer and they would still think about Meta and Google. And so they would onboard at companies A, B, and C. And when things don't go well and things there's always ups and downs. So when they're having a down moment, they're thinking about, oh, okay, maybe things will be different at Meta and Google, right? Oh, and then the thought of going for Meta and Google will continue to linger in the back of their mind, which is taking up unnecessary storage in the mind. So that's one path. The other path is they get a job offer from A, B, and C and they onboard. And meanwhile, they still want to go through the Meta and Google interview. So they're managing onboarding and the Meta Google prep at the same time, which is a lot to handle and manage for a lot of people. So that's the second path. And the third path is you don't do well in A, B, and C. And at that point in time, you're walking into the Meta and Google interview with a lot of baggage. You start to second guess yourself a ton because A, B, and C didn't go well. So that's going to affect how you show up. And so for all those reasons, I don't recommend this roadmap if your dream is to go for Meta and Google and go through the team matching process. What I recommend is a roadmap that looks more like this instead, which is you focus on Meta and Google first without distractions, given that these companies are your dream companies. And then while you go through the team matching process, you go for companies A, B, and C. The reason why I recommend this approach is because when you put in the prep for Meta and Google, you're in prime shape to interview at other companies. So going through A, B, and C will feel a lot easier. You're going to feel so much more ease and grace when you're going through companies A, B, and C. So even if you don't do well at Meta and Google, you're still very well prepped for A, B, and C to begin with the exception of Amazon, because Amazon just has a completely different process. So the happy path here is you do very well at Meta, Google, and then you go through team matching, and then you interview at A, B, and C in parallel. And at the end of it, you would walk away with an offer from A, B, and C, and then use that to negotiate with Meta and Google, which is the best leverage that you will have when you want to negotiate the highest possible offer. The unhappy path is Meta and Google doesn't work out, but that's still okay because you're going to experience so much more ease and grace with companies A, B, and C later. And I know that this approach works because I have helped my clients through this process. This year, 8 of my clients have walked away with a Meta offer. So I know that this works, and that's why I'm sharing it here with you. So if this feels like it aligns with what you want for 2025, then your next step is to prepare to ace interviews at your dream companies. And you would now need the clarity to shorten your time to offer so that you don't spend too much time with the preparation process. And that clarity is focusing on what good answers look like at your level so that you can reach the top of that bell curve ASAP. That's a plan that has worked for a lot of my clients. And when it comes to preparing for the job search process for these top tech companies, only 20% of the effort should be spent on acquiring the knowledge, and 80% should be spent on applying the knowledge. So just binge watching videos is not going to be enough for you. That's in the 20% bucket. 80% of your time should be spent on applying what you have learned that gives you high level of clarity on what good looks like for your level. And 80% is the part that could take a lot of candidates 6 to 9 months on their own. And one of the fastest ways to accelerate your time to offer is to increase the quality of the 80% so that it doesn't take you as long. And that clarity should be focused on diagnosing the gaps that are unique to you. Everyone will have different gaps, but really understanding what your gaps are and knowing precisely how to improve those gaps. That's how you go up the bell curve and hit the top of the bell curve faster. And the shorter time to offer also means decreasing your opportunity cost. I have helped many clients gain this clarity and accelerate their time to offer, like one of the clients here who had two offers from Loom and Dropbox, as well as other clients that have landed offers from other tech companies this year. If you would like to join them, if you need help accelerating your time to offer, I'll be sending you an invite afterwards later today to see if you would want to explore next steps together. Thank you, Ha. With that, I want to bring Gerta back on the screen. And wow, I ended right on time at
That
30
was
minutes
perfect.
after. Okay, let me bring you back on stage. What questions can I answer?
Thank you, Nancy, for that. I learned a lot myself too. Um, do we want to go chronologically? We have some from the very beginning. Someone
It,
said, go ahead.
what do you think? It's up to you on the ordering.
Okay, how about I start reading a few and then you can pick the ones that make the most sense. So the first question ever was, is there a framework you recommend to nail product sense slash maybe analytics for big tech? Someone else says, what's the most efficient way to do company research? And someone else says, who is hiring and how do we get our resumes recognized in the big tech company?
I'll start with the framework question because that's top of mind for a lot of my clients as well. I would say um, the frameworks that we know that are shared publicly, they all work, and there isn't a framework that is technically better than another framework. Uh, the root of it is that you want to showcase strategic thinking and not just applying frameworks like a robot, because anyone can apply frameworks like a robot. What the framework does not tell you is how to pick a particular segment to focus on or how exactly to pick a metric that is a North Star. That is what I would recommend that you focus more time on versus memorizing frameworks.
Yeah. There was a lot of interest in this question. I don't know if it falls under something you want to talk about, but it was like, how do I identify toxic culture during the interview? Lots of interest in this one. Um, so I'll just read in batches of three in case you want to pick your favorite. When is the best time to start the job search? And what's your pulse on the market?
Mm. I want to answer the timing one. The best time to stop the job search, I would say there is no best time. It's kind of like saying, you know, how a lot of creators on the platforms will figure out the best time to post. And then they try to figure out how the algorithm works and then they want to time it. It's also similar to how you want to time the market in terms of investing. It's not, you don't have to time it. That's not what moves the needle. What moves the needle is knowing knowing the gaps that are unique to you and knowing precisely how to close that gap so that you could ace your interviews. And so the timing should be a non-variable.
Yeah, and lots of questions on the market. The market is, at least what I'm seeing, very competitive. And people are asking, do you expect the 2025 job market to be more or less competitive? I have my take on this. What do you think, Nancy?
I have a very spicy take on this, which is very different, which is the opposite for most people. My spicy take is that there's always going to be competition, regardless of how good or bad the market is. So, for example, when the market was very good, and a lot of people think that it was a lot easier to get job offers back then. That's partially true because back then when the market was good, you're also competing with a lot of people who are shopping for offers. And so for one candidate would go out and try to get five job offers and then negotiating them against each other. And so maybe there were less candidates in the market back then. They were also doing a lot more interviews. And so you're competing with the very type A candidates back then. And now there's also competition. There's more candidates, but you're meeting less of the people who want to get five offers. Most of the candidates just want one offer. And so the competition exists for sure. It's a different type of competition. And so if competition exists no matter how good or bad the market is, it's a constant, right? If it's a constant, I don't recommend that we focus on it because that's not what actually moves the needle. And that is my spicy take.
That's very spicy.
And what is your take on this, Gerta? You say you also have a perspective.
Oh, it's just I do think it's the market is very tough right now. All of my clients are mid-career to execs in tech and super talented, incredible resumes. And it's been extremely competitive in the market, even with top talent, and it's been very discouraging. I think it's still very important to keep your spirit up because each interview is unique, and you want to show excitement so that they give you a better offer.
For sure. And I would say domain expertise really, really helps in this market. I was helping a client go through a FANG interview. It didn't work out though, and we were both very sad because we put in good work and good effort, especially my client. But what happened afterwards was so beautiful because they actually started to interview at a smaller company, still a public company, but just smaller, not FANG. But they were able to up level. So they went from senior PM to director of product. Even though the FANG interview didn't work out, what happened afterwards was actually way better for them. Now they're managing a team. They went from senior PM, IC level to now director with 35% increase in total comp, managing a team just completely up level. And that's why I meant when I said you want to focus on the prep, put in high quality prep. So even when the FANG company interviews don't work out, what happens afterwards, you would experience so much more ease and grace after.
Definitely. Um, we have one that there's been a lot of interest in this question. Do you have any advice on how to engage slash invigorate the interview conversation if your interviewer doesn't seem focused or is giving disinterested vibes? Would love to understand how to salvage an interview if you encounter a bad interviewer.
I love this question and I am a very vibey person. I love vibes and I let vibes have a huge say in the decisions I make, which is not completely logical all the time. And my take on the situation is we are not designed to vibe with everyone, period. End of story. We all resonate on a particular frequency. And if the frequencies between you and the other person just don't match, it's not going to work out long term anyway. It's kind of like when you go on a bad date and the date just doesn't go well. It's okay. It's actually better that the date didn't go well. So
Yeah,
that would be
it's
my
like
spicy
fail
take.
fast. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like fail fast, right? The startup
Just
person one.
it's okay that you don't vibe with everyone and that's also by design.
Yeah. More questions here are, I would love to understand what moved the needle for you, Nancy, between not passing the meta interviews versus passing the final time.
I would say the approach that I took is not what I recommend for my clients now, knowing what I know. I did it the brute force way. I did it that's why over 100 hours of prep and it still didn't work. It was just, okay, I need to do a lot of mock interviews. I need to practice with a lot of meta PMs and then just try to do as many practice questions as possible. I approached it like memorizing vocab for the SATs. That was my approach back then. It works at a certain level, though. I think if you're more junior, it is okay to have a brute force approach. But if you're more senior level, I don't recommend that approach. The approach that I now use with my clients that has worked for them is really focusing on understanding what the crux of the problem is that you're trying to solve for product sense questions or analytical questions. It's focusing on the crux, and you want to be able to articulate and frame your answers really with high intentionality on knowing what the crux is.
We need to learn from each other. So just yeah. Um, Someone says, can we delay an interview if you feel you need to be more ready? How will it be seen, especially in this market when there is so much supply of PMs?
I would say if you are interviewing at companies like Meta and Google, definitely delay the interview until you're ready because the opportunity cost is too costly if you just try to wing it. The cool down period is typically 12 months. Sometimes you will get, if you're very close, your borderline case, the cool down period is 6 months. But that's very costly, right? You should always delay the interview until you're ready. I have a client who delayed their interview 4 times and it was not a problem. Actually, recruiters know that candidates need more time when they get into the prep.
Nice. And by cool down period, do you mean how some big tech companies like Meta and Google, they say, hey, you can't apply for like the next 6 months
Yeah,
if you didn't. Yeah.
yeah. And that's very costly. Think about the
Yeah,
opportunity cost, right? If 1 year delta is 250K, think about the
right,
opportunity cost with that cool down period.
right. Um, well, someone, at least three people are asking, do you work with clients who have no interest in paying companies?
I work with clients who are interviewing at companies that follow a similar process as Fang, especially if the hiring managers come from Fang.
Yeah, that's important. Do you also provide support to prep a good resume for job applications in Pang? Do you help with resume?
That's only on a limited capacity. The and that's because I want to make sure that I'm utilizing my zone of genius that will move the biggest needle for my clients. My zone of genius is acing interviews and not necessarily getting more interviews. But having said that, I did give a workshop on how you could get more interviews, which is free on YouTube. So you could go on my YouTube channel and find that workshop. I've gotten very good feedback on it. So still helpful to watch, but that's not necessarily my zone of genius.
And Kat asks, where can we learn more about your coaching service?
You can follow me on LinkedIn.
Okay. Can you share more about your perspective on solo prep and how to effectively practice independently? It seems like a lot of folks recommend practicing with others.
My perspective, and I guess this is also a spicy take, is if the end goal is to get on stage and perform, then the playbook is prep off stage first and then dress rehearsal and then get on stage. That is a playbook that has worked for thousands of years. So yes, you do need to practice with other people. That helps you prepare to put on a show. You could get ideas from your partners, but again, it largely depends on the readiness level of your partner. The best case scenario is that you're always practicing with people who are more ready than you, then you will get tons of value. But if your partners are not as ready, then you will be the one providing that value. But in a partner setting, you would definitely have the opportunity to practice how to handle your anxiety and how to handle your emotion when you're put on this put on a spot and be on a hot seat.
Got it. And then one of the last questions here, I think it's pretty well timed, is what's a typical length of engagement that works best for you and your client?
The the default program that I offer is a 4 to 8 weeks program. So 4 weeks on case interviews and 4 weeks on leadership and behavior interviews. Some clients do it at the same time. And so that would be a very intense 4 weeks for them. But most of my clients would choose the 8 week path.
Got it. Zena also asked, and can you recommend a product coach for a senior PM plus who are targeting startups, not FANG? I think what you said was, in the startups, a lot of people come from FANG, so it's
Yeah.
good to think about that.
If your interviewers come from FANG, then I would recommend myself. I would also recommend other coaches too, who have experience helping their clients land offers. So you could, if you need recommendations, you could ping me on LinkedIn. I send a lot of recommendations to people too, because I can only work with 8 people at a time.
Do we want to keep going, Nancy? There's two more
I
questions.
do you think those are
I
top of
think
mind
it's good to
questions?
clarify. Yeah, it's good to
Okay.
clarify. So do you coach only on leadership and behavioral parts in acing interviews or anything else?
I coach on acing case interviews as well as leadership and behavior interviews.
Nice. And the last one for now is, so the best way to start engagement with you is after we secure an interview call first?
I don't recommend that because it takes time to prepare. Like the bell curve thing that I showed, the best time to know that you're ready for these interviews is when you're at the top of the bell curve. And this is also a principle that Gerta, you have with negotiations. Tell
Right.
us more about why you shouldn't wait until the very end to think about negotiations.
Oh gosh, I get so many people who are like, "Oh, I'll start working with you when I get an offer." But by that point, you've given away so much of your leverage along the way. Like you've shared your preferred salary, which is something you shouldn't do, who you're interviewing with, how much they're offering, and all that. So the earlier we work together, the better. And I feel like we both wouldn't turn people away if they're so early. We'll just say, "Hey, let's keep talking." So when is the best time to start engagement with you?
As early as possible,
Yeah,
for sure.
great. Same.
Same thing for Gerta.
Yeah.
And that's why, as business partners, when I start working with a client, I tell them immediately, schedule a call with Gerta and her partner. That's the best time. You always want to give yourself more time and always start early.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right.
What, they're still trickling in.
Okay.
Lucy says, following up on the bad interviewer question, if it's an off interviewer from Meta or Google before time match, and you're trying to just get the interview back on track, is there advice you can share? I feel like there's a story here.
There's a story, and because I have failed the meta interview multiple times, I I lived this. And I remember in one of my earlier product sense interviews, it was just off track completely. Um, I would say if you're doing an execution interview, there's a higher chance of saving the interview because in an execution interview, it's less of a sequenced story that you're telling. Now, in a product sense interview, I don't know if there's a good way to save it because in a product sense, you can't really go backward. I mean, there's ways where you can go backwards, but you're also under time constraint. So I would say it is harder to save the interview in a product sense interview, but easier to do so in a execution interview and also easier in a behavior interview. And a tactic that I know that works is you start calling them by their name. So let's say, Lucy, if you're my interviewer and I see that you're losing interest or you stop caring about me, I'll say, hey, Lucy, X, Y, and Z. So I would just start mentioning your name over and over again. People like, in general, they like to hear their own names.
It's the best sounding word for everyone, their own name. How is your coaching compensated, Nancy? Is it a fixed cost or some percentage?
I actually talked about the business model a lot with Gerta, and there's pros and cons to each. And I basically pick the model that I know can scale across multiple people. And so I picked the model that is fixed cost, not percentage cost, because that allows me to scale. The percentage business model works very well when you are very close to the client until the very end of the process. But a lot of my clients go through Meta and Google that has a team matching round. And so one of my clients, we started working together in Q1 this year, and they just went through team matching in Q4. So that time frame is 1 year. And I I don't have a systematic way of closing the loop when the duration is very long. So I have a fixed cost business model.
Yeah. And is the 8-week coaching program a class type? Is it live? Which piece is about finding the gap of the
Yeah, it
candidate?
is live. Well, so it has a bunch of recorded content from previous coaching calls. Because I've been doing this for over a year, there's probably hundreds of videos in the content library. So a lot of my clients would go through the content first and then they come to the live sessions. In the live sessions is when we figure out what your gaps are.
Wow, more questions trickling in. Will there be one-on-one feedback during the 8 weeks?
Yes, so there are three one-on-one calls within throughout this engagement. One is in the very beginning when we onboard you, and that is when I take a baseline measure of where you are when you start. And then we have another one-on-one for case interviews and another one-on-one for behavior interviews.
And is your coaching, if your coaching is 8 weeks, but your client took close to a year, how did that work? What if
It
a client needs more one-on-one?
So this particular client went through the group program and then decided to work together privately because they wanted more support. And then after the one-on-one, I basically just supported them async over email.
Great. I think we may have gotten to all the questions. What is the group coaching? Okay, they're so
Yeah,
curious.
you can scan the QR code actually, and then there's a link that will take you to a one pager that describes more about what I could offer. Great.
We may have reached the end. No,
Yeah,
no.
thank you so much. Oh.
They're asking about details of the cost involved for the group and the one-on-one coaching.
I would recommend because I cannot work with everyone and the program is also not right for everyone. So scan the QR code, take a look. If it resonates, then there are questions that I would like you to answer on the second page. Based on the questions, and I could determine whether this program is right for you or not. And then we could talk about all the details associated with it. Thank you so much for coming. And Gerta, thank you so much for moderating.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right. Happy holidays and happy new year to you all. Take care.
Happy holidays. Bye, everyone.
Bye.